The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, croeso cynnes I chi gyd, a very warm welcome to you all. I'm sitting here in sunny, or it was a minute ago, sunny Mid Wales, and I hope whichever corner of England, Wales, Scotland or Northern Ireland you are, you're feeling comfortable and reasonably safe, hopefully with a cup of tea or something beside you. We've got a fascinating session today again as part of our Accessing HE series. Before I introduce the speakers though, a little bit of a shout out for a few bits and pieces that are on the go at the moment. You may have seen on LinkedIn already that the shortlist for the Career Development Awards has been released overnight. Good to see good representation, some really strong contenders for those prestigious awards out already. Good to see that representation right the way across England and Wales as well. So have a look at that, and if you're interested to actually follow the ceremonies themselves, we're doing something slightly different this year because of course 2020, 2021 are the years of doing things differently. So you'll be able to and listen to the finalists and talking about what they've done, and then see who's won on 3 consecutive days: Tuesday the 9th, Wednesday the 10th, and Thursday the 11th of March between 3:30 and 5. Online, all the details you can book to see that, no charge obviously, but you can make sure you pop along to see who's won and shout for your preferred winner along the way. So if you go to cdi.net/awards-shortlist, you'll find everything you need to there. So apart from the excitement of the awards, and obviously this session is being recorded, just to make that clear to you, this is a recorded session for playback later, to flag up 3 conferences coming up. One is the National Research Conference, which is happening on the 25th of this month. That's Demystifying Research and Encouraging Curiosity. And then there's a 2-day student conference happening as well. And also, sorry, so it's a 2-day event rather. And then there is the National Tech Fest Conference, where you can start to explore things to do with innovation, ethics and practice, social media and digital skills. There are some fascinating sessions lined up for that already, so 3 conferences. In terms of other webinars like this, there's another in the HE series which I'm hosting on Wednesday. That's with the ever popular Paul Martin, talking about how to help students write effective personal statements for university applications. There's a session on nursing on the 5th, and then I'm again hosting Paul on the 9th for looking at university interviews and admission tests. And then on the 12th, there's a CV workshop supporting your clients with their CV needs. That's all part of your free webinar series, which counts towards your 25 hours of CPD if you're a registered career development professional. So if you're on the register, obviously you need to be doing 25 hours a year. That was a Freudian, 25 hours a year to keep your registration up, and I'm sure a lot of us do a lot more than that. So if you want to dig into some more topics more richly, there's some online expert training coming up as well. Tomorrow there's challenging skills, and later in the month then we have on the 11th introducing careers in primary schools, mastering your LinkedIn profiles on the 23rd, and on the 24th there's transitions to HE career development work. So if you're thinking about changing sector, that might be a good one to have a look at. Finally, 2 others to shout out about this month. One is on LMI on the 25th, and also on the 25th, developing strategic perspectives, team leaders, managers, careers leaders and careers advisors. So some expert training there as well. And in turn, finally, just if you're looking to make some connections locally, there's some regional meetings coming up. The East Midlands Regional Meeting, making the best of online resources and available resources, is tomorrow. The day after, there's the peer support for private practitioners. That's always a lively event. That's at 7:30 in the evening. And then there's other regional meetings. CDI East of England has got a Speakers for Schools event on the 4th. And there's also another one coming up later in the month, which is East of England. That's looking at social justice and social mobility in careers, education and guidance. Last but no means least, also CDI Northwest Regional Meeting, just sneaking at the beginning of March there. So all of those notices bring me on to something which is really important today, the focus of today's session, which is all around student finance in England and Wales, and it's an update for the academic year 21-22. And this is really going to be highlighting all sorts of things. Experts who between them have got around about a decade's worth of experience in this area. So I'm absolutely delighted to be able to welcome them back today. And just before I introduce them, a quick little snapshot of who they are and what they do. So Stephen Jones is one of the speakers. Stephen looks after North West England and North Wales. and he's worked for Student Loans Company for 5 years, and most recently working within Funding Information Services, and that's looking at FE, higher education, postgrad, and careers advice partners, supporting them, providing student funding information and support. And he's also worked for Student Finance Wales team as well. They're doing lots of different things with some specialism around disability. The other speaker today, so warm welcome Stephen, the other speaker today is his partner in crime, Stacey-May Fox, and Stacey spent 15 years in account management and now sits in the Funding Information Services team as well, again working around the FEHE, postgrad and careers advice partners. Her patch is southwest of England and South Wales, and before that she was in commercial recruitment for over a decade and has been with Student Loans Company for about 16 months now, and previously worked with Barclays Bank on the student and graduate relationship management side. So that's the thumbnail sketch of the two experts we've got lined up for you today. This is your chance to ask questions that concern you, that you need more information on, specific clients or client groups. Please pop those questions as we go through the questions box that available on your desktop now. Ask them there, and we'll go through those all at the end, just to make sure that we've covered anything that isn't answered as we go through, and a chance for you to ask any other questions. So pop those into that chat, into the questions box, and we'll pick those up at the end. So that's my cue to go over to Stacey and Stephen. We are fascinated to hear what you have to say about this year's update.
Hi Carolyn, and a warm welcome to everybody attending today. Thank you for sparing some time to run through these student finance updates. Steve and I are going to run through some academic updates, as Carolyn mentioned, for 21-22. We're also going to sort of touch on some of the COVID processes which were instilled during 20 and 21. As Carolyn mentioned, it was certainly the year or years of doing things very differently, and Student Loans Company was no different in that sense. So Carolyn, I think, mentioned we will sort of open the floor up to questions at the end. So yeah, I hope everybody's settled with a cup of tea. So we will start. As I mentioned, 2021 is certainly the year of doing things differently, and SLC is no exception to the rules. So aside from these sort of normal tribulations, I guess, that we've all experienced with the closure of contact centres, etc., at the beginning of the year, we are now fully operational, but there's been lots of other, I guess, things that we've needed to consider during 2021. So some of those have been things like the passport offices being temporarily closed and face-to-face interviews suspended, which begged the question, how will students with no passports actually be able to confirm their identity? Another issue with universities and colleges being closed is how can we get the HEPS countersign documents, such as Section 5 on our DSA applications. Again, with sort of the institutions being closed and thus sort of HEPS not having face-to-face contact with their students, how are we going to be able to get the consent to share set up? And also sort of one of the big issues, which I'm sure lots of us are familiar with, is that many people have lost income due to redundancies and furlough over the last year. So how is that going to impact on household income assessments? So we've been working very closely with the Department for Education to try and improve the services that we provide and the support that we're actually able to offer our customers during this time. So one of the solutions that we came up with regarding UK nationals who do not have a valid UK passport are now only required to provide their original UK birth certificate if they are applying for either a full-time or part-time undergraduate or postgraduate funding. This can also be accepted for advanced learner loans. So effectively what that's done is sort of done away with what we call the applicant's declaration of identity form. This has so far only been approved for 20 and 21, so the current academic year, not the one that's due to start in September. However, these sort of changes were put into place very sort of early on in the academic year. I think we still had a lot of hope then that sort of COVID would be out of our lives, certainly by the end of the year. Obviously, that's not been the case. So I would say sort of watch this space as to whether or not that's something that may continue into the next academic year. But just want to caveat that initially, at the moment, these COVID-19 processes only relate to academic year 20 and 21. Okay. So one of the other sort of issues that we've mentioned is the sort of getting forms that need to be countersigned by the HEPs over to Student Loans Company. So another sort of COVID-19 process, we've determined that students who are applying for estrangement status or financial hardship can now submit those forms and evidence by email. So I've included the email addresses on there, just in case that's something you want to refer to. All I would highlight is that these forms can only be accepted if they have been sent from your ac.uk email addresses. We also touched on earlier the Section 5 counter signature for the DSA form. So essentially, certain students who apply for DSA do need to have that Section 5 of a full DSA application form completed by their HEP, and that form generally confirms sort of certain course details. However, we very much appreciate that it's unlikely a lot of students are able to get those forms countersigned face-to-face at the institution. Therefore, Student Loans Company has determined that we will also accept an email from the student's HEP from that ac.uc address in lieu of a signed and stamped Section 5. I have just included a quick summary of what would need to be included within that email in order for it to be accepted, and that's just information such as academic year, course name, course start and end, year of study, mode of study and intensity of study. So again, I believe Carolyn will be uploading this presentation to the website anyhow, but again I will send the slide deck across to her if anybody would like to take a copy of that for referral purposes later on. One of the other issues that we touched on was around the consent to share. So there is a slightly different process in Wales and England. Wales are very lucky in the sense that they offer the secure messaging service. So essentially, if a student needs to set up consent to share so that a practitioner will be able to discuss their account with the Student Loans Company on the student's behalf, the student can actually request that a consent to share is set up through the instant messaging service on the portal if they are a Student Finance Welsh student. However, with England, they don't actually offer the secure messaging service. So to introduce an alternative way to get that done when you're not able to call up with the student in front of you, we have created the new consent to share form. So again, I've included a link to that within this slide, and also just included a quick snapshot of what that form looks like. Effectively, the student just needs to provide some sort of basic details such as their name, surname, date of birth. They also have to stipulate their relationship to you, so exactly who it is they want to have set up on that consent to share, and they also need to create a password which they will give you access to so that you can then contact us on their behalf. We also have been frequently updating the gov.uk Student Loans Company page with lots of COVID-19 frequently asked questions. So in the first instance, if you do have any queries, I would sort of certainly suggest that you check the gov.uk address, again included the email on there or the link on there. But certainly if that does not answer your questions, then please don't hesitate to get in contact with either Steve or I. One of the things we mentioned a moment ago was the household income assessment. So certainly 2020 and 2021 has been a year full of furlough and unfortunately lots of redundancies. So that is likely to have an impact on sort of household income. So normally when we request household income in order to do the assessment for the maintenance loan, we ask for the last complete tax year. So for instance, any student who is starting a course in academic year 21-22, it's actually the information from 2019 to 20 tax year that we ask for. So bearing in mind that last year lots of households may have certainly taken a big reduction in comparison to the 19-20 tax year, we do have something that's called the current year income assessment. This is essentially for any household whose income drops by 15% or more in the current tax year. We can then either reassess an application or assess a new application based on the estimates. We would then ask for confirmation at a later date to support those estimates. So again, I have included the form snapshots so you can see what they look like for both Student Finance England and Student Finance Wales. And I have included the links so that they are available for you to download and pass across to students, or certainly to signpost them in the right direction. So just to reiterate, the most important thing that people are aware of is that if there is a combined, obviously sort of, for example, a mother and father, it is based on the combined household income. So if, for example, mother's income has reduced by 15% and father's hasn't, unfortunately that wouldn't be a reduction on the combined income. So just to be aware that it has to be a 15% reduction as a minimum on that combined household income. Okay, just to give you some examples, because it is set up slightly different with maintenance loan for Student Finance England and Student Finance Wales. But if the household income was previously less than 25,000 for SFE or 18,370 pounds for SFW, then there's no need for the student to complete that current year income assessment. Purely sort of reason being is that because they are below the minimum threshold, if you will, the student will already be getting assessed for the maximum amount of funding. So the only time that that would make a difference is that if the student is in receipt of the grants for dependents, because generally the threshold for grants for dependents is lower than the maintenance support. So in instances where an SFE student is earning £24,000, it's not necessarily worth going through the CYI for their maintenance supports, but it's certainly worth them doing it if they have, if they're benefiting from the grants for dependents. Other scenarios where the CYI might not guarantee additional support would be if the assessed household income is expected to be more than 59,200 for SFW or more than £70,000 for SFE. Essentially, that will mean that the student, irregardless, is only going to be eligible for the non-means tested supports. Okay, and again, just a bit of an overview of how the online application form looks. And there's also sort of a screenshot of the SFW site where, again, it will relay the information. Okay, and now I'll pass you over to my partner in crime for the digital evidence submission.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. So we're just going to talk about digital evidence submission now. It's something that is live now for students and for sponsors as well, and it's attached to their online application process. So if I could just have the next, thank you. So why have we brought this this service online for our students and their sponsors? So customer research highlighted that there were multiple pain points within the paper evidence submission process. So up until this academic cycle, all financial evidence from sponsors, so pay slips, P60s, things like that would need to be sent to us in the post. And similarly, other evidence regarding the students' residencies, so how long they'd lived at particular addresses for, would need to be submitted via the post. So this presents problems for students and their sponsors. So one, it's a lengthy and manual process having to post evidence. There's also the cost of having to post evidence into us. So if you're sending in original documentation, like a residency visa or passport, then you would be probably more likely to send that signed for or recorded, which has an additional cost there as well. So the other problems with this is that students and sponsors couldn't be sure what evidence has to be provided to us. So they were sending a lot of information or just everything that they had. And also they don't know whether it's been received or whether it's been processed, and they don't know if it's been sent back. So there were a lot of pain points for our customers, and particularly relating that to DSA, those disabled student allowance. While we only ever request that students submit photocopies of evidence, a lot of students were submitting original evidence. And while that's in that evidence cycle, if you like, they haven't got access to it, and they may need that evidence for other benefits or services that we'll be looking to get hold of. So we brought the process online. Now, it's the students that are in scope for this at the minute are full-time students for Student Finance Wales and Finance England, and also some of the part-time students. However, part-time students unfortunately can't submit their DSA evidence and claims via this way at this point in time. We're looking to bring in postgraduate and EU students, but just at the minute, we're still rolling out the process to make sure that everything is working well, and just making sure that our processing teams are able to use it on the other side as well. So because of the regulations that we work within inside of UK Gov and the devolved nations, there's some evidence that we can't accept and there's some that we can. So you can see here some of the evidence that we can accept now: estrangement forms, study abroad forms of expenses. So for the full-time students, DSA medical evidence and claims. They can also apply for the DSA service online as well. And for sponsors, we can, as Stacey mentioned, the current year income forms. We can have marital status declaration forms. So if someone is separated, they can let us know this way as well. And then there's other financial evidence that we would need to see from them as well. Thanks, Stacey. And again, this is a more detailed list, which is handy for students and sponsors to see what can and cannot be accepted. So it goes into a bit more detail around childcare grant, non-means tested to means tested forms. So if you initially applied not to have the sponsor's household income assessed, then the non-means tested to means tested form is the form that would be filled in, and the financial evidence of the sponsors would be taken into consideration there as well. Next slide. Thank you, Stacey. As I mentioned before, at this point in time, because of the regulations that we work under, we still can't accept original documentation that we need to see, and this needs to be submitted via the post. And a useful tip within student finance is, if whichever mode of post the student sends the information in to us by, is how we return it. So if it's a recorded delivery, then we send it back recorded delivery. If it's signed for, we'll send it back signed for. If it just comes through the general post, then we'll just return documents through the general post. So for some of these sensitive documents here, clearly a lot of students would prefer to send those recorded, and they have certainty of being able to track that through the postal service till it arrives with ourselves. We are looking to change the way that these rules are governed. However, it's just going to take time. Student loans company policy is quite complicated, and we need to get sign off from the relevant areas just to make sure of that. Just to give you an idea of where all of this sits within the application process. So when a student completes their online application, they've accepted our terms and conditions, like the online signature, if you like now. After that, they come up to another screen on their portal, and there's a list of tasks that they need to complete to ensure that they get their payment released on time. So that may be submitting financial evidence or evidence of residence, or it could be for the financial sponsors to send in the documentation that confirms their income. So they're all on this screen. Now, the student or sponsor at that point there can either choose to send those documents to us online, so scan them or take a digital picture of them using like their mobile phone, etc. Attaching the documents is really easy. It's just exactly the same as if you're attaching a document to an email to send it, and the student gets an email back then to confirm that we received it. And because it's automated now, it means that that document is uploaded almost immediately for the assessors to start reviewing that within their work queues. So that means that we can actually improve the speed that we're accessing this information regarding the student's application. So it means that it's an easier process for our students. It means that we can access the information quicker and get the responses back to the students quicker. It also means that they keep the documentation with them at home, and they're not sending in evidence to us that they may, as I say, need for other benefits. They're looking at universal credit, etc. Thanks, Stacey.
No worries. So yeah, obviously we're very excited about digital evidence submission, and we look forward to watching it roll out and making everybody's lives lots easier. So I'm just going to jump into some key messages and budgeting for students, and again sort of focusing on academic year 21-22. So we've just got some bullet points around sort of best practice and trying to sort of, I guess, bust any myths that we may have. One of the biggest things is that students do not need that confirmed place at university or college in order to apply. They can get an application in with their preferred choice, and if they change their minds or even decide not to go to university, we can change those details at any point later. I've also included the link for students to apply online, and that's www.gov.uk/SLC. Another really important thing I think is worth making students aware is to ensure that they actually have all of the relevant information to hand before they apply, because I think there's probably nothing more frustrating than, it's like going to apply, getting halfway through, realizing that you need information that's stored up in the attic or what have you. So just really keen to let students know exactly what it is that they will need. So that is going to be their NI number, their passports if they have it, or obviously, as we mentioned, for academic year 2021, they can currently use their long birth certificate if they don't have a passport. Students need to make sure that they also have their personal bank account details, due to obviously the fact that we are sending those funds to the student themselves. They cannot use their mum's or their dad's bank account details. It must be an account in their name. So if they haven't already, then to ensure that they have an account set up. Also ask that they provide their parents' email address, so that we are able to contact them to provide information for that household income assessment, and again it just avoids further delays, and just in general making sure that any evidence or information that's needed to support their application is supplied right first time, and that goes for students and parents or partners, so that they can ultimately be assessed and paid on time. And as ever with any financial product, just ensuring that they do read, understand and agree to those loan terms and conditions. We'll talk about it a little bit later on, but just to highlight that both SFE and SFW have now introduced a mailing list which students can sign up to right this second, and that will actually notify them once the application window has been launched, so they will be first in the know to know that they are able to get that application through, and less likely to ensure that they get their money paid before, well, ultimately in time for starting uni. So another thing that students might be considering at the moment is around the costs. So can they afford ultimately university, and what costs are they likely to sort of incur? So again, just highlighting sort of the normal things that they would expect to pay, such as books and other essential study or course materials. Things like accommodation, mobile phone bills, internet, any sort of sports activities or social activities, and food and drink. But again, things that perhaps they may not have thought of, such as insurances, TV licenses, things like that. So again, just really preempting that planning that budget can be helpful. I know that Martin Lewis does offer a student budgeting Excel spreadsheet on Money Savings Expert site. So again, might be worth sort of directing students to that. We've also got some information, included a link on here from Save the Student. So they do quite a lot on budgeting and accommodation, and you'll notice that I have actually stolen some of their slides, which we're going to run through now. So on average, students across the UK spend around sort of £795 per month. Save the Students have very kindly done a bit of a breakdown here on sort of what that money is being spent on. So obviously big chunk there is rent, quickly followed by groceries, going out, transportation, and just general bills. I'm not going to run through every section, but I don't think there's much on here that's unexpected. Personally, from my time as a student and graduate relationship manager, I'd say £46 ongoing out a month is being very generous compared to the students that I used to see on a day-to-day basis. But it's certainly worth sort of students having a serious think about that before they embark on uni, so that they can sort of budget that maintenance support to ensure that they don't face any difficulties whilst they're at uni. Again, sort of one of the main things for students to consider when they are determining which university they're planning on attending is that accommodation costs can vary, as I'm sure we all know, dependent on where you're residing. So again, another Save the Student accommodation survey where we've tried to sort of get an average of rent for accommodation across the UK. So again, unsurprisingly, London leading the way with expense, around about £162 per week. I think sort of my region, Southwest, sort of looking at around about £135, and sort of South Wales, my other region, around about 113. So, and again, a bit of a breakdown there. And just really reminding students to, when they are looking at accommodation, to make sure they ask questions like which bills or utilities are actually included, if any, within the rent. Okay, so the most crucial thing I think is to think of income versus expenditure. Make sure that all the costs are being considered, and all the support effectively that they may be entitled to. So we've obviously got accommodation, so we know that that's going to be something that needs to be paid for. Travel is another one. So is the accommodation going to be close to campus? If not, how are they going to travel to and from every day? How much is that roughly going to cost? If they are residing away from home, then how often might they want to go back home? How are they going to sort of travel back? Is that going to be train, megabus? Obviously, again, sort of those expenses can be quite a big difference, so just something to be considered. Food and lifestyle, study materials, so that just sort of the general cost. And then compare that to sort of what income they're expecting. So obviously we've got the student loans company package, so the maintenance support and potentially DSA or grants for dependents if that's something they're eligible for. Are they looking to work part-time in order to subsidise sort of their income? Bursaries and scholarships, another thing that I'm always trying to push, make sure that students are looking into what might be available to them. There is a website called the Scholarship Hub, and it's quite interesting if you guys want to take a look and just have a little bit of a nose. Some really weird and wonderful scholarship bursaries available on there. I believe from memory, there was one that stipulated if your name was Graham, then you'd potentially be eligible for a £1,000 bursary. There was another one that was either a vegetarian or a vegan bursary. So like I say, some real unique bursaries available there and scholarships. So I certainly direct students to take a look and see if there's anything that they may be eligible for. If the student is a care leaver, are they eligible for a local authority care leaver subsidy? And again, the NHS support package, which we will sort of touch on in a moment.
Okay, thank you very much, Stacey. So what we're going to do now is have a look at some of the numbers, if you like, just to have a look what the student finance package is going to look like for academic year 21-22. So if we start with tuition fee, so we know that the tuition fee for both full-time, part-time and accelerated degree courses offered will be frozen for the 4th year in succession. So you can see there the figure there for full-time tuition fee in England is 9,250, 9,000 in Wales. We do know that the UK government is looking at the Augur report that was received maybe 12 months ago now, or a little longer, and they have already started to put together some of the recommendations covering lifelong learning and enhancements to the way that further education is financially supported, a slight change to the model there as well. There is a consultation that will be launched shortly and isn't expected to report back until 2025-26. And there's also been no further comment as regard to the recommendation in that report around reducing tuition fee levels to 7,000, and that wasn't commented on or hasn't been commented on as yet. We are expecting there to be some reference to this in the comprehensive spending review, which has been delayed obviously because of the pandemic, and as also there's the consultation that is taking place as well. Thank you, Stacey. So we're going to have a look now at the maintenance support, and this is where, if you like, again, the devolved nations are slightly different to England here. So we're going to start with Student Finance England and how the maintenance support is calculated for students. Now the handy thing is there is a student finance calculator there that students can use and sponsors can use to get an idea of how much maintenance support a student loans company or Student Finance England is going to be able to provide for them. So if we look at household income of 25,000 or under, then they will receive the maximum amount of maintenance loan. And you can see there probably the most popular rate we get there is the elsewhere rate, which is £9,488. Important also just to cover off here that estranged students and care experience care leaver students, there's no household income calculation completed for their applications. We just need the relevant evidence through from the students. There's further information on that on our website, but they would receive the maximum amount of maintenance support as well. There is also a different set of rates for students that are eligible for benefits. Now, we're not going to show you those today, but it's something that we can share with you if you need that kind of information. But this is just to give you an idea of how the support is calculated and what students at dependent household incomes can expect to receive. So you can see there as the household income, oh sorry, just pop back just a little bit, sorry Stace. You can see as the household income increases, the level of support that the student will receive from Student Finance England reduces until you get to the 65,000 level, where you start to see there that all they're going to receive is that non-means tested element. So they become what we call as sort of overscale. So they won't receive any more support than those levels you can see there. And this is why Stacey was talking about the current year income assessment. If the household income has dropped, the importance of completing that application if there has been that drop, because you can see there that the amount of maintenance support that the students would receive would increase. Thanks, Stacey. So we're just going to look now at Wales, or Student Finance Wales, and how their maintenance support is provided. Now, a couple of years ago, there was a review in Wales about how student funding was provided, called the Diamond Report. And what the report recommended was that all students would receive the same amount of support. So you can see there, everybody will receive the same amount. How it's made up is dependent on household income. And you can see there the thresholds are slightly different. So the maximum and the minimum thresholds are different to the ones you'd see in England. But it means that every student will receive the same amount of money. It's just the amount of a grant that doesn't need to be repaid and loan that does need to be repaid will differ. And this is linked to the national living wage. So students are receiving a reasonable amount of support based prorated on the fact of the length of the term. That means that it should be more affordable to study. And this also applies to part-time students as well. So when Student Finance Wales review the amounts for year on year, it's linked into that national minimum wage. When England look at it, they tend to increase their amount for maintenance support in line with inflation. So this year we've seen the English rates increase by 3.1%. Thanks, Stacey. Okay, so we're going to talk about disabled student allowance now. This is where there's a really big change in policy this year. Probably Brexit and disabled student allowance are the two biggest changes that we're going to see moving into academic year 21-22. So disabled student allowance has always been made up of 4 separate sub-allowances. So non-medical helper support, you'd have equipment, specialist equipment, general allowance and travel. So those would be the 4 pillars. Now each of those 4 sub-allowances had a maximum amount of support that was available to students within that. And some of those sub-allowances were renewed every year, and some, like specialist equipment, was for the duration of study. Now, the other thing that was different was that the postgraduate levels of support for disabled student allowance were different to those of undergraduate. So to give you an idea, the non-medical helper allowance for undergraduate was £23,000 a year, and that refreshed every year. When we first launched the postgraduate master's loan, the disabled student allowance was £10,000 for the duration of study. So you can see how there wasn't that level playing field. And also part-time students would see their non-medical helper support at undergraduate level reduced based on the intensity of the course as well. And unfortunately, disabilities don't reduce with the intensity of study. So we were putting some students at a less of an advantage than others now. The whole idea of disabled student allowance is to level up that playing field so that disabled students have the same opportunities through higher education as able-bodied students. So first of all, there's going to be a change. So we're not going to have 4 separate sub-allowances anymore. We're going to have 1 maximum allowance. Now in England, that's set at £25,000, and Student Finance Wales, that's £31,831. And this is going to apply to both full-time, part-time, postgraduate and undergraduate DSA recipients in academic year 21-22. So that's a massive change, and it means that disabled student allowance students will be able to review how they access that fund in a more flexible manner. So this will apply also to new and continuing students. So that's also a massive plus. So when we just look at this slide here, it shows you what the maximum allowances are currently for academic year 21-22, and you can see the changes there moving into 21-22. Now, back when I was working with Student Finance Wales, we had a number of occasions where the recommendations for non-medical helper support or specialist equipment would be over that allowance, and we had to let students know that the amount of support recommended exceeded the allowances that we were allowed to fund. So the students had to face a choice there, really. If they wanted to access that full level of support, they needed to find the money to pay for that from another source, whether that was themselves or some support from the university or some sort of bursary or support. The specialist equipment, because that is an annual, it is for the duration of the course, that caused particular problems for some students. So if you had a number of conditions and you may need things like a laptop or a printer, or you needed a specialist chair or desk or multiple screens, that gets quite expensive quite quickly. And we had one student who, amongst the conditions that they had, was that they were partially deaf, and they needed waterproof hearing aids so they could complete their placement as a paramedic. Now, I didn't know at the time, but it turns out that waterproof hearing aids are really quite expensive. So the student there had to make some difficult choices around the specialist equipment to access for the course. And not forgetting, of course, that if a new disability is diagnosed in year 2 or year 3, then obviously those limits could become challenging as far as accessing the support they need. Within the new structure, it means students can choose what services they want to access, but also don't forget, if you've had to obtain specialist equipment in year 1, in year 2 you've got full access to that £25,000 again. So that means that if you were having to maybe not take all of the non-medical help or support that was available in year 2, you would. Last thing I'll talk about regarding disabled student allowance is travel allowance has always been defined as reasonable spending. And what that means is that if you have a physical or mental disability that prevents you from using, say, for example, public transport to get back and to university, then we'll provide support to get you to and from the university buildings or libraries. Now, in Wales particularly, we know that people travelling quite a long way from the valleys into Swansea, Cardiff, etc., where the university hubs are, and some of those journeys can be quite expensive, as the number of taxi firms working in those areas is smaller. So that's why travel allowance is always sort of sat as unlimited, and it's just important to note that will sit outside of that new single rate as well. So that's not included within the overall 25 or £31,831. So really good news for disabled student allowance students who are accessing this support. It means that they're really able to level that playing field and make sure they're getting the best opportunity to succeed at higher level education. Thank you, Stacey.
Okay, just going to talk about grants for dependents. I'm also going to apologise because my dog is snoring next to me. So I promise all the noises come purely from the dog and not myself. So just a quick slide on grants for dependents. So again, main thing to highlight is that these are grants and not loans, and therefore will not need to be repaid. But ultimately we have the childcare grant, which can be awarded to students to assist them with the costs for childcare whilst they're attending uni or college. The award, as I mentioned earlier, is based on household income and the student's individual circumstances, but ultimately it's based on around about 85% of the actual registered or approved childcare costs. However, it is capped at a maximum of £179.62 per week for one child, or £307.95 for 2 or more children. So certainly worth sort of highlighting any students with dependents, that there may be additional money available to them, because we all know that childcare can be very expensive. I will sort of get ahead of myself in the next slide and just explain that the childcare grant in England and Wales is slightly different in the process, but not on the amounts. So effectively, Student Finance England introduced a new system, I think, the beginning of last year. Effectively, they now have a portal. So once a student is determined as having dependents and thus eligible for the childcare grants, they will register who their approved childcare provider is. Generally, a lot of those companies or organisations are already registered. However, if it is a new provider, we would need to get them set up, and there's sort of certain stipulations there. But effectively, most approved childcare providers are now on that register. So it almost works like, I always liken it to a timesheet system. So at the end of the week, the student will sort of submit how many times or how many days effectively their child has been with the childcare provider. Once they submit that, it will then go to the provider for them to confirm that, yes, I've had this student's child or children so many days this week. And once it's been confirmed on both sides, that will come through to us, and then we will make the payment directly to the childcare provider. However, Wells at present are still using the previous process, in the sense that it is all applied for on paper with the estimates, and the payment is made to the student directly, and the student then pays the provider. So Steve, I'm sure you'll correct me if I'm wrong. There is potentially sort of talk about the portal may get rolled out to Wells, but certainly that wouldn't be until sort of 22-23. So at the moment the process is as is, but certainly watch this space for any upcoming changes. We also have the Parents Learning Allowance. So again, any student with a dependent, a child, can potentially get the PLA to help them pay for books, study materials and travel. Again, this does depend on household income as to how much they're able to get, but it can literally be anywhere between £50 and 1,821. So again, certainly worth directing students with dependents that way. There's also the adult dependence grants. So this is for any student who has an adult who's dependent on them, particularly financially. The adult's net income cannot be more than £3,796 for additional funding from SFE, or that adult net income cannot be more than £3,923 per year for Student Finance Wells. On the basis that it is under that, then the student may be eligible for another grant, which the maximum level is £3,190. So we've already run through that one. So I'll pass you back to Steve for the NHS, and just to let everybody know we are sort of coming near the end of the session now as well.
Thanks very much, Stacey. Okay, so there are differences in funding between Student Finance England and Student Finance Wales, so we're just going to run through some of the core support there you can see. So starting off in England, so the core financial support for students carrying out nursing, midwifery and allied health professional courses in England will be the same core funding. So tuition fee, maintenance loan is the support that they would receive and apply for in the same way as any other student in Student Finance England. But probably about this time last year, actually a little bit before, the UK government announced that they were going to add in some additional support for NHS students who are English SFE funded and studying courses in English universities. So this is the NHS training grant. You may have heard a bit about this. It was in the press a lot about 12 months ago, and it's live now. So new and returning students who are completing degree level nursing, midwifery and allied health professional courses from September 2020 are able to access and apply for this. So this is on top of the funding that we supply already, and is administered by the NHS British Support Team, so NHS BSA. So you can see there the courses that are covered, and these students will receive a £5,000 training grant, which isn't repayable. So that's brilliant. I'm sure you'll all agree that our friends and colleagues that are working in the NHS right now, this is good news for particularly students who are training to become nurses. There are also an additional £3,000 worth of payments that can be made per academic year as well. So there's an extra £1,000 towards childcare costs, and there's also another £1,000 if they're studying in a region that's struggling to recruit. Now that hasn't been confirmed, the areas haven't been confirmed yet, so that's still not up to date on the NHS website. But there is £1,000 for students who are studying a shortage specialism, and I've popped those in there so you can see mental health nursing, prosthetics and orthotics and podiatry, learning disability nursing and radiography as well. So all students will receive £5,000 a year training grant that they don't need to repay, but some students will receive an additional so £8,000 a year that isn't repayable. So there's loads of more great information there on the NHS BSA website, and we've just embedded a link there into the page so that you can see it. So you can see there the list of courses that are covered in this, and there's no great surprises there. It's generally falls in line with the Student Finance England courses. As part of the application for the training grant, NHS BSA will want to see that students have received notification of entitlement letter from Student Finance England for their core funding. Okay, thanks, Stacey. So as you can imagine, things are slightly different in Wales, and in Wales, as providing that students want to can carry on working in Wales for 2 years, then they'll receive NHS bursary support. So there'll be more information on that on the Welsh NHS funding website. So you're able to have bursary support. You can choose to opt out if you want, and we'll talk about that a little later. Students who want to study in Wales from Student Finance England, Northern Ireland and Scotland, they can still access the undergraduate package of support from their domicile as well. So if we just have a look at the next slide, this just covers the courses that are covered with the bursary support, and again, no real surprises there. They fall in line with standard Student Finance Wales and England funding models there. So if you're a Student Finance Wales customer and you don't want to take the bursary support and you want to take the standard Student Finance Wales funding package, then you can choose to do that. It may be because you don't want to work for 2 years in Wales. It may be simply that the finance package, as far as maintenance support from Student Finance Wales, is more advantageous, more attractive to you than maybe the bursary support you may get. Obviously, there's a difference there with repayment. Bursary, you don't repay. Tuition fee loan, maintenance loan, you will have to repay. So there's lots of considerations there for students to think about. But if they don't want to have the bursary support, then they just need to tell NHS Wales, who will give them a registration number. They send that to us to opt out of bursary support, and that's the key that tells Student Finance Wales that they will assess them as a standard student. Worth noting that if they do take the bursary support, then all students will receive a reduced rate maintenance loan from Student Finance Wales, but that, as I said, will be repayable. Thank you. So there's further information on the bursary support from the NHS Wales Shared Services Partnership website. Lots of frequently asked questions there, student guidance, and some real understanding of what the bursary rates that are available to students are as well. So a great place to signpost students to. Thanks, Stacey.
No worries. I'm going to sort of go quite quickly, I think, through sort of the last couple of topics, just purely because I'm very conscious of time. I know that this is going to be uploaded to your website anyway, so I won't take too much offence if anybody does have to shoot off and then wants to rewatch later. So we're just going to talk around repayments, which obviously is very important, again, for students to be aware of. One thing that I will highlight is that students do not make repayments until their future income is above a certain threshold. So currently, for academic year 2021, that threshold is £26,575 a year gross, which equates to roughly sort of £511 weekly or £2,214 monthly. However, this is going to be increasing from April the 6th this year, and that will rise to £27,295. Just to sort of confirm that this doesn't start until the student enters what we call the repayment stage, and that is effectively the April following the student either completing, withdrawing or leaving their course. On average, the students will repay sort of 9% of any income that is above that £27,295. And if they are employed through sort of the standard PAYE system, then the deductions will be made from their pay through the HMRC tax system. If their income does fall below that threshold, then their repayments will stop. And another really important thing to reiterate is that any outstanding balance after 30 years of entering that repayment date will actually be written off. Okay, so just to give everybody a bit of an indicator, and I think this is really useful to share with students as well, is sort of what does that actually mean to a student on sort of a real day-to-day monthly basis. So just to give you an indicator of what those sort of monthly repayments are likely to look like, effectively any student who is earning £30,000 per year, which I think is quite strong for a graduate salary, would likely pay round about £20 a month. So I generally liken that to round about 5 Starbucks coffees, if that, which in the grand scheme of things, obviously in sort of investing in your future, in your career, it's quite reasonable. And again, you will notice that as the annual income increases, so will those monthly repayments. So effectively, it's all around, again, affordability. Again, I have included sort of an overview of what the actual interest rates are, if students are sort of interested in knowing that. But one of the main things to highlight is that the student does start paying interest from the day they enter study until they enter repayments. On that basis, the student will generally pay the RPI, which is the Retail Prices Index, which is a figure that's updated once a year from March and then carried through and applied in September. So during study until they enter repayment, the student will pay the RPI plus 3%. And for a student who is out of study and earning income, if their income is below that 27,295 threshold, they will only pay the RPI. If they are earning above that threshold, so from 27,295 to 49,130, they will pay the RPI plus up to 3%. And for any graduate who's earning over 49,130, they will pay the RPI plus 3%. Okay, so again, you'll have these slides to refer to. Steve will just quickly go through European students, and then we're just going to sort of run through the resources that we have available, and we'll be ready to round up.
Brilliant, thank you, Stacey. So what I'm going to cover now is just what we know really about what's happening with European students in the next academic year. It's important to caveat that at the minute we still haven't had the regulations laid for Northern Ireland and Wales, and we're still receiving updates from the Department for Education as they move through further discussions with Home Office. Now, there are some webinars that are being run by our funding information team. If you haven't had one of the invites, please don't hesitate to get in touch with Stacey and myself, and we can give you some information on how to register for those. They're being run on the 10th and 17th of February, and they're going to go through a lot of more detail than I certainly am today. But in a nutshell, we know that Brexit's happened, and there's going to be changes to funding for European Union nationals who want to start an academic course with us in August 2021 onwards. So Stacey, if you just want to move on. So these students will no longer be eligible for home fee student status. That's for all SFE undergraduate and postgraduate products. This will affect advanced learner loans as well, and will also apply to further education funding for those 19 plus and funding for apprenticeships. Next slide, thank you. So there is this won't affect EU students starting their courses in 2021 or now. If they're in full-time education now, this means that they will continue to get funding for their studies, but it won't apply to people that have got citizens' rights under the withdrawal agreement. So I'm sure you'll all remember before Christmas that went right up to the wire with the withdrawal agreement being signed now. So there are some instances where European students will be able to access funding with us for their higher education. This also doesn't apply to Irish nationals living in the UK or Ireland, as their right to access benefits and services is preserved under the Common Travel Area Arrangement. Thank you, Stacey. So those students that were in the UK by the 31st of December 2020, the last day of the transition period, will have citizens' rights. And that means that if they've got 5 years of UK residence, the individuals can be granted settled status through the EU settlement scheme and apply for support that way. If they've got less than 5 years residence in the UK, then they're granted pre-settled status. And those with pre-settled status can also apply for funding for courses starting in academic year 21-22. So what does that mean in kind of layman's terms, if you like? So the EU settlement scheme has been open since March and is going to remain open until June of this year. And any EU citizen residing in the UK needs to apply for through the EU settlement scheme to access not just educational funding, but benefits, and acknowledge the fact that they're resident here with us in the UK now. And I suppose if we look behind the words now, if first EU citizen had 5 years residence in the UK, then they would be able to access home fee status, which means they get maintenance support and also tuition fee support. And that remains the same. The wording may have changed in front of that a little bit, but as long as they've got settled status, so 5 years UK residence, then they'll be able to access that full support, so maintenance and tuition fee funding. If they've got 3 years UK residency and within that pre-settled status element, then they would be able to apply as an EU citizen would now, and they would get the tuition fee element of that support. And once they transition from pre-settled to settled, so went above that 5 years, then they would be able to receive the full package as well. So that's what happens to EU citizens that were in the UK before the final day of the transition period. For those that arrive after, so from the 1st of January onwards, they don't have citizens' rights, so they won't be eligible for support, and they will be subject to the new immigration rules, which we believe is going to be similar to Australia on a points-based basis, but we're still waiting to find more information on that. They will only be eligible for support if they fall into one of the exception categories below there, so Irish nationals, Gibraltar nationals, and returning students with pre-established eligibility, meaning that they've been in the UK for 5 years, have that EU settlement scheme, settled status, and they may have gone back to the European country where they're from, or Europe. We don't know how long that gap can be to return in, and these are some of the questions that will be answered during the webinar that we're running on the 10th and the 17th. Thank you very much.
Okay, so just going to run through some of the resources that you've got available for any Student Finance England queries. So number one is our practitioner website, which I'm hoping a lot of you are probably more than familiar with. So it's our one-stop go-to location for any SFE policy guidance documents, any product-specific information, and also our latest resources. So again, just included sort of a couple of pictures on there to show you exactly what that looks like. But you'll see that it's fairly easy to navigate. So we have a breakdown of products that you can try and find what you need quite quickly. And there's also information for Steve and the rest of my team within the funding information partner account managers section, lots of policy documents. So yeah, really good sort of place to refer to should you have any queries or need any information. My team have also sort of gone a bit above and beyond over the last year and realised that there was some additional information or additional resources that we felt would make your lives easier. One of them being this research to repay fact sheet. So this one is actually available on the practitioner's website, so the link's been included there. This just provides an overview and some signposting to all the sort of real essential information that students need during each stage of their finance journey. We also have some additional leaflets which unfortunately haven't made it to the practitioner site yet, but we have information sort of focusing more on mature students, information for parents, and I believe another one sort of focusing on care leavers. So whilst they're not available on the practitioner website, please feel free to either get in contact with Steve or myself, as we have access to those as PDFs and can get those through. We also have the interactive Quick Start Finance Guide. So again, this one's a bit more visually pleasant, if you will. So lots of information around key facts and figures, how to apply, dependence grants, the DSA, just student finance explained for parents, and some more information around repayment. So this one's very device friendly and can be viewed on sort of smartphones and iPads, etc. And again, there's lots of links to other SFE sites, our social media channels, and gov.uk as of when they're needed. And these ones can be printed for you to use within your institutions. I did touch on this earlier, but we have our campaign page for SFE. Again, the link's embedded in there. Here there's more information around eligibility, support available, and repayment. But what I'm most excited about is the mailing list option at the bottom. You'll see the sort of band of yellow. So within that, the student can sign up to be notified as of when the application process is launched. And finally, we have the gov.uk page. So again, sort of very integral when going to apply. Also lots of additional information posted on there. And we also have a variety of social media presences. So you can find us at the Student Room, and you can find us on Facebook. I would say that we seem to be doing quite a lot more on Facebook, certainly for the next academic year. So hopefully be able to get information out to a bigger audience. We also have a Twitter account, so there's our Twitter handle, and as well as a presence obviously on UCAS, and there's also lots of videos that you can potentially embed onto your own websites if needed. And I think from memory there are a couple of that have already been updated for academic year 21-22, so do take a look when you get a moment.
Okay, so I'm quickly just going to spin through some of the resources that we've got available for Student Finance Wales students. So we've got our student-facing website. It's got loads of great information on there, and it's really useful for both parents and students to get the information they need on application. You can also see in the top right-hand corner the login register. That's where our Student Finance Wales students will start their application journey with us. Thank you, Stacey. We've also got our prac site. It does look different to England. The SFE site has been put behind the gov.uk website, whereas Student Finance Wales is still owned by ourselves, which means that we can be more flexible with the content that we put in there. And there's lots of great resources available for the students there as well. So again, you can see there the campaign is live for Wales as well, in that students can sign up for an email notification from ourselves when we open for student finance applications 21-22. And again, there's lots of great resources behind that, as well as some videos and some useful information. We've got our practitioners helpline, so please don't forget that that's there. There's also the same for England. Where you can, as a practitioner, you can email with a query around policy or complex assessment, and there's also a phone number as well if you want to just chat it through. Thank you, Stacey. And not forgetting, of course, our customer helpline. So if students are struggling with their application or has a query about one of the services we offer, that's kind of their first point of call there, really. We've got a really great team based in Llandudno, up in North Wales, who will be able to answer any of those queries that the students have and point them in the right direction. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Can I just quickly, sorry Carolyn, if I could just quickly add, before we move to the questions, I've included a link which I'll send to you directly as well, but if you guys do have a minute, if you would possibly mind giving us some feedback on how you found today's session. It's obviously very important for us to gather insight as to how useful these are, so the link's included within there, and I'll send it over to you directly, Carolyn, in case you want to cascade it. And also just to reiterate our contact details, so you've got both Stephen and I on there with our numbers and email should anybody want to get in touch. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you ever so much, Stacey, and thank you, Stephen. There are a couple of questions that are sitting here waiting, and just to confirm for anybody else drops off the call, we will be sharing the slide deck out to everybody who's on the call, and we'll make sure, if you can drop me over that link, we'll make sure that link goes out as well, so that you can give them some feedback, please, if you're on this call. There's obviously a huge amount of detail there. Two questions I wanted to pick up on. Unfortunately, somebody's already had to leave who's asked that question, which is around, is DSA rate repayable or is it a paid allowance?
So the DSA again is a grant. Oh, sorry, Steve.
And that's what I thought you. That's lovely. So it's a grant, marvellous. And then the other one is quite a long question. I'm not sure if either of you had a chance to look at it. It's around the status of those who are existing students, is the way I've read that, in terms of your answer for EU. So I will read this out very quickly. We support a large number of UK citizens, passport holders living in and studying in international schools in Europe. We understand from the latest government policy docs that the student who's lived in either the UK or European Union for the past 3 years will be classed as home students for fee status. Students are getting different offers, home international students fees from different universities, and we, students and schools, are doing a lot of chasing with universities. Are we correct on the fee status? We've talked with Government Office who agreed we are, and are you aware of what messages are being sent to universities on this?
Okay, so the answer is yes, they're correct. If you've got a UK citizen in England, in studying in Europe, or over there because your parents are working over there, then it's the 3 years is to be eligible for home fee status. We're looking to really clarify the message that's going out from universities with the information that we're going to provide with EU exit, making sure that the messages are clear. So we've already got over 1,000 people signed up for the webinars. That means that we'll be able to communicate that message clearly to universities. And if students are concerned, please get in touch. Obviously, we've got our student helpline numbers there for both England and Wales, which I would recommend as their first point of contact. But if you've got wider feedback on messages that are going out that don't look right, then obviously you've got Stacey and myself now as a point of contact. And we can pick that up with our marketing teams that can go out to the universities. We can also pick it up with the relevant account manager in that area to give the university some feedback as well.
That's great. Thanks, Steve. Is it possible for you guys to send me over the invitation for those two webinars you've talked about on the 10th and 17th? We'll pop that with the information pack that goes out to delegates today as well. We'll go out tomorrow now, but if we could have that.
We actually need to be able to register them on the contacts database in order for our events team to be able to send them. So I can certainly put a bit of blurb in, but it would mean that they need to sort of come back to us quite quickly in order to get that invite out.
No problem at all. If you could do that, that'd be marvellous. There's one other question just popped in. Evidence requirements. If you have a UK national, i.e. British passport, but the passport is now out of date, but they were born overseas, do you accept their overseas birth certificate? If not, what else can they provide? Shall I read that again?
No.
Yeah, sorry. I was just trying to think as I was doing that. Go on, read it again for me, Caroline.
It's a question around evidence requirements. If you have a UK national, i.e. British passport, but the passport is now out of date and the individual was born overseas, will you accept their overseas birth certificate in lieu of the passport, obviously? And if not, what else can they provide?
I'd say that, sorry, Steve, go on. I was just going to say the birth certificate. I know that we only accept the UK birth certificates in lieu of the passport, don't we, at the moment? So yeah. So I wouldn't have thought that we would accept the international passports. I mean, if that sort of individual has already had a passport, a UK passport, then they wouldn't need to go for a face-to-face interview at the passport office, would they? So they should just be able to renew their passport. Do they need to be within date, Steve?
Yeah, so they need a valid UK passport, but if they were born overseas, it's only the UK passport it's only UK birth certs that we can accept. So they need to renew the passport, or just have a look at what other evidence they can say that they've been within the UK for the required time as well. So evidence of residency.
That'd be on a sort of case-by-case basis as well, wouldn't it? Because obviously at the moment with the EU regulations, if they were sort of born within the EU, they'll now have the settlement information as well. So I'd just say if you do have an individual scenario, to get in touch with us directly so that we can look into it, because it may sort of vary dependent on sort of the country as well.
Brilliant, thank you very much. So there's some very technical questions there, and Kat's just said, who asked that question, said thank you. She also asked about the naturalisation certificate. You've obviously wrapped that up with your comments earlier, so thank you very much for answering all those really quite technical queries. You've given us a whistle-stop tour around the challenges and responses to COVID, the move to digital submission, myth-busting, try to say that with my teeth in here, myth-busting along the way, looking at student spending, scholarships for all sorts of profiles, insights into different political systems on funding for differences between England and Wales. We've talked about loans and how they're repaid, all the DSA grants. One quick question on that. That grant figure you quoted, is that for the entire period of study, or is that per year, that's sort of 25, 30k? Is that over the 3-year period or post-grad period?
Yes, so that.
Yeah, so it
could be refreshing every year. Yeah.
So it could be 90 grand's worth of support for somebody who needs that much over a 3-year course.
It'd be 90 in Wells, wouldn't it?
Yeah, ish. Yeah, so just a round figure. Okay, great. That's great. Thank you. So that's per year. That cleared that one up nicely. You've talked about NHS funding, the encouragement to help people take that direction. Of course, there's a lot of interest in young people looking at that now because of COVID and wanting to make a difference. I'm not sure there are many stones you haven't left unturned for us. Helpful. It's been an absolute pleasure to host you both again. Thank you very much for the enthusiasm and energy that you brought to the session, and thank you to everybody on the call tonight listening and putting your questions forward. If you do have any specific questions, you've got Stacey and Steve's contact details. Stay safe, stay well. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a lovely
Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stacey.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, Carolyn. We'll catch up soon.